Dear students, let us start our today's class with a prayer. Direct, O God, our actions and further them by your gracious help, so that every prayer, word and work of ours may begin always from you and be through you happily ended. Amen. Seat of Wisdom, pray for us. Don Bosco, pray for us.
Hello children, it's been a long gap since we met. Hope you had a fabulous and colorful Onam, even though you were confined at your homes. So again back to physics classes as well as your studies. So I welcome you once again to our physics class. We were dealing with the lesson friction and we had discussed about the topic of friction as well as the factors affecting friction. So till that point you are clear, isn't it? So I ask you one question. There are two surfaces, rough surface and smooth surface. Which surface offers more friction? What is the answer? Yes, it is the rough surface that offers more friction. Okay, so with that we come to today's topic, that is we are going to discuss about the advantages as well as disadvantages of friction. So each and everything in the universe offers some advantage as well as some disadvantage. So likewise, friction also has got certain advantages as well as disadvantages. So we will see which are the advantages as well as disadvantages of friction today. So in your textbook, page 149 and 150, there is a topic, friction a necessary evil. So you have to go through that topic in order to reconciliate with this advantages and disadvantages of friction. Okay, so that means this topic, that is the textual topic, gives you a brief description in a vague way, in different ways, and what I am going to say now is the main points of that topic, friction a necessary evil. That means the advantages as well as disadvantages of friction. Okay, I hope you got it. So have your textbook with you and go through it. Okay.
Binny, could you please help me with my luggage?
Sure, sir.
Not that one, Binny. Drag the trolley bag. This one is too big and heavy for you.
I'm a big girl, sir.
Thanks, Binny. Well, in this luggage dragging business, I forgot to welcome you all to Science for Juniors. Hi, I'm Scientist Radhikrishnan, SRK, and this is my assistant Binny.
Professor, why is it that wheels make things easier to drag?
You have asked a very profound question, young lady. Let me try and answer it scientifically for you. Let's enter the virtual world. In this module, you will learn about friction, its uses and problems. Can you predict how your palms would feel when you rub them together? Bet you feel heat being generated. Rubbing makes your palms warm. Have you ever thought why? Rubbing of hands produces heat because of a force called friction. Friction is an opposing force that occurs when two surfaces rub against each other. Consider another example. Push a book kept on the table. You will notice that the book slides some distance and stops moving. Similarly, a football rolls when you kick it and stops moving after a while. Why does this happen? In both the cases, there is a force between the objects that comes in contact. This force between the book and the table and between the ball and the ground stops them from moving for a long time. Such a force that always acts against the force of action is called friction or frictional force. So now you know that it was difficult to drag the regular suitcase because of higher friction in comparison to the suitcase with wheels.
But why is it always easier to move things with wheels?
I'm coming to that, Binny. Well, see, friction acts on wheels too, but wheels reduce the surface area of an object in contact with the surface. Wait, open my trolley bag, Binny, and pull out a pair of shoes and roller skates. Now look at this.
Wow, sir! You know how to skate!
Of course, Binny. Now getting to the point, isn't skating much easier and faster than walking?
Sure it is, and it's much cooler too. I also see that it is much faster and easier to move on wheels than by sliding.
Of course it is. Now my body weight, mass, etc. doesn't change whether I wear a shoe or skates. But the friction acting on my skate wheels is much lesser than on my shoe. Did you get it?
Yes, let me also try skating. Ouch!
Well, Binny, skating is not all that cool either. You need to do a delicate balancing act to be able to skate well. Let's now jump into virtual world for more knowledge on friction. Let's now take a look at some of the important properties of friction. First, friction is a contact force and occurs only if the objects are touching each other. Second, friction opposes the direction of motion. That is, it slows down and stops the motion of a moving object. Third, friction produces heat by converting a part of the energy available in the form of kinetic or potential energy to heat energy. Sure, you have heard of the Stone Age people who used to start fire by vigorously rubbing stones. It is often overlooked that friction is important for our daily life. Take a look at this. The boy is able to walk because of the friction between his feet and ground. It provides a grip on the ground that is necessary to avoid slipping or falling. Ever wondered why sneakers always have treads on the bottom? The treads on the side of the sneakers create friction that gives some extra grip when you run and play. Similarly, it is the friction between the wheel and the brakes that helps in controlling the speed of a bicycle and even in stopping it. Here is another example: friction helping in achieving the desired motion. Take the case of a parachute. As air rubs against the inside of a parachute, the force of friction causes it to fall slowly. The greater the air friction, the slower the parachute moves. Check out these examples from our daily lives. The nails that we use to hang different things are held in the wall due to friction between the nail and the wall. Friction is also needed to pick up objects and hold them. In the same way, while climbing a rock, friction between the hands and the rock stops a person from slipping.
It was because of friction that fire was invented.
Right. In fact, even today, matchsticks are lit because of friction. You notice that the surface on which the match lit is rough.
But will that mean that matchstick can be lit by rubbing it against any rough surface?
Of course not, Binny the Mini. Don't be silly. Matchstick can be lit only when rubbed against the rough surface of the matchbox, because friction between the two materials raises the temperature enough for the reaction to take place and hence lit the matchstick.
Got it, sir.
Binny, there is science behind all the day-to-day things we encounter. Just that we haven't discovered many things yet. In fact, I have many more day-to-day examples where friction acts. Just that you wouldn't have thought that friction acts on them too. Take a look. Excess friction makes it difficult to move objects and slows down moving objects. For instance, friction slows down the motion of a bicycle. Even moving a car on an irregular road would be difficult when there is excess friction. What about machines? Do they involve friction? You may be surprised to learn that any object or device that has moving parts can wear out easily due to friction. Many of the machines that we use in daily life would not operate smoothly if they are not protected from the heat and the wear and tear caused by friction. Yes. Now another thing.
Bring it on, sir.
Well, you know grease and oil reduce friction. Try oiling your cycle chain and see how smoothly it works. It will help increase the life of your cycle. Well, let's try this out. Hold this steel glass. Is it easy to hold?
Of course it is.
Now, try holding this. It's just a game. Relax. But did you see that oiled surfaces slip easily?
Sir, I got your point. Now I realize that the same thing happens in machines too. Now I get it.
Great! Then one last surprise now.
But sir, you said this was the last one.
Well, that was just to keep you going. Tell me, Binny, have you ever written with a regular pen on a card?
Yes, sir. But pens usually don't write well on card paper, especially on the birthday cards pasted on the gifts.
Good realization, Binny. Now, why is that?
Don't know, sir. But my guess is friction has something to do with this.
Well, the guess was a good one. As in this case, both the surfaces are smooth. Now, have you wondered as to why it is easier to write on a blackboard with chalk?
Now I know, sir. It's because both the surfaces are rough and the friction is high.
Excellent, Binny. You do make me feel so proud of you sometimes, you see. Well, now that the surprises are over, let's revise what we learned today. The three important properties of friction are: friction is a contact force and occurs only if the objects are touching each other. Friction opposes the direction of motion. Friction produces heat. Friction is useful in providing a grip and preventing from slipping and sliding. Binny, let's go. Binny, what are you thinking, Binny?
Sir, I'm wondering, sir, my brother moves so slowly. Is it because he's much bigger and bulkier? He experiences a lot of friction while on the move, hence can't move fast.
Come on, Binny, don't be mean.
So let us see what are the advantages of friction. All of you are able to walk and run on different surfaces, isn't it? We are able to walk and run. Have you ever thought what makes us walk, run, jump on different surfaces? It is none other than frictional force. So if there was no frictional force between the surface, that is the ground surface, as well as our foot or our feet, we won't be able to walk and run. What will happen? In case there is no friction, every time when we attempt to walk or run, we will slip and fall. Okay, so what happens? We will slip and fall every time when we attempt to walk or run. And on wet polished surfaces, what type of friction force will be there? High or low? Just imagine, recall our previous knowledge. So on wet polished surface, the frictional force will be very less. So what may happen? It is easy for us to slip. So that is why on smooth polished surfaces we attempt to slip. Okay. So what is the first advantage? We are able to walk and run on different surfaces with the help of frictional force. If there is no friction, what happens? We will slip and fall. And always remember, wet polished smooth surfaces offers lesser friction. Okay, so that is the first point. Now I want to hang a calendar on the wall. What is needed to hang a calendar on the wall? We need to have a screw. Okay, we need to have a screw or a nail in order to hang a calendar or a clock. So what happens? If there is a screw or a nail which is fixed on the wall, it is easy for us to hang the calendar or the clock. But if it is not there, what should we do? We have to use a hammer or a drilling machine in order to drill the nail or screw on the wall. So what makes the nail or screw to get fixed on the wall? There is a force of friction between the wall, that is the rough surface of the wall, as well as the tip of the nail or the screw, that helps the nail or screw to get fixed onto the wall. Okay, so remember, it is the frictional force that causes the nails and screws to hold on to a wall. Okay, so that is the second advantage. Okay, now let us move on to the third advantage of friction. Suppose you want to light a candle for a prayer service. What do? You have to use a matchstick to light a matchbox. So you use a matchstick to light the candle. So you have, what you do? You have to rub the matchstick against the rough surface of the matchbox, which has got certain materials which are coated on it. Okay, so the rough surface of the matchbox offers a frictional force against the head of the matchstick. Okay, so what happens when you rub the matchstick, in the matchstick head, it has got certain chemicals in it, and also the matchbox, the side of the matchbox also has got certain chemicals. So when you rub the matchstick on the rough surface of the matchbox, there exists a frictional force between these two. So there exists a frictional force between the head of the matchstick as well as the rough surface of the matchbox, and it is due to that we are able to light the matchstick. But do remember, we also have lighters. Please don't take that into account in this case. We are speaking about only matchsticks and matchbox to light the candle. Okay, so remember that it would not be possible to light a matchstick without friction between the head, friction between its head and the side of the matchbox. Okay, so that is regarding the third advantage of friction. Now we come to the fourth advantage of friction. Now we all travel a lot. Okay, so we travel in different vehicles and different automobiles. Have you ever thought what makes these vehicles move? It is none other than frictional force. So the cars and buses are able to run on roads because of the frictional force between the tires and the road. So as a vehicle moves, the tire as well as the road, okay, so between these two surfaces, between the tire and the road, there exists a frictional force, and it is that frictional force makes the vehicles, cars, buses and all move on the road. So we are able to move in cars and buses, and these cars and buses move in turn of the frictional force between the tires and the road. Okay, now coming to the next advantage. So coming to the next advantage of friction. is all of you write on paper, isn't it? You also write on boards. Your teachers write on blackboards or whiteboards or any surface wherever we need to write something. There exists a frictional force between the tip of the pen or the chalk against the paper or the rough surface of the board, which makes us to write. So if there is no frictional force between the tip of the pen and the paper, what happens? The pen will just slip off and we will not be able to write. So remember, writing on the board as well as on a piece of paper is possible with the help of the frictional force between the tip of the pen and the paper, or between the tip of the chalk as well as the rough surface of the board. Okay, so friction helps us in writing. Now coming to the next advantage of friction. So without friction, we won't be able to stop a moving vehicle. Okay, that means it is because of the friction between the brake shoes and the wheels that the bicycles and automobiles stop when brakes are applied. Remember, it is because of the friction between the brake shoes and the wheels that bicycles and other automobiles stop when we apply the brakes. So I told you before that friction helps us to move in vehicles, that is, friction helps vehicles to move, and it is the same friction that helps a vehicle to stop. So there exists a frictional force between the brake shoes as well as the wheels of the automobile that helps them to stop when brakes are applied. Okay, so we have discussed about six advantages of friction. Okay, and I hope it is clear to you. So just recall it by reading your textbook. So these points are mentioned in your textbook in a different way, and what I have said is the gist of the advantages of friction. Now let us move on to the disadvantages of friction. What are the different disadvantages of friction? So we spoke about the advantages. Likewise, friction has got certain disadvantages. What are they? So a lot of energy is wasted in overcoming friction in different situations. I repeat, a lot of energy is wasted in overcoming the friction in different situations. So what is that? Wastage of energy is occurring. Okay, that is the first disadvantage of friction. Now another disadvantage is that friction causes wear and tear of the parts that rub against each other. I repeat, friction causes wear and tear of the parts that rub against each other. Okay, so suppose you buy a new shoes. Wearing it initially, it appears good, isn't it? So if you wear it daily, or if you use it daily for about 2-3 months and see the shoes once again, what happens? Does it look new? It won't look new. You can see that the soles of the shoes have worn out. That is, due to the continuous usage of the shoes, the sole of the shoes has been changed into another shape. That is, the shape also has changed and it has got worn out. Okay, so likewise, friction causes the wear and tear of the moving parts that rub against each other. So you can see that when we use different types of machines for different purposes, the parts of the machines get worn off, and same is the case with the tires of vehicles also. So after using it continuously or for a long period of time, you can see that you have to replace the tires and all, because the tires, all the sides of the tires get worn off. The shape has changed continuously, and same is the case with each and everything that we use. So remember, the second disadvantage of friction is that friction causes wear and tear of the different parts that rub against each other. In each and every object, the same thing occurs. Okay. Now the third disadvantage of friction is that friction produces heat. I repeat, friction produces heat. So when we use a machine or when we use some mechanical parts of a particular machine or anything for a long time, what happens? It gets heated up and a lot of energy is wasted also. So what happens is that these parts get heated soon, and when it is overheated, it can cause damage to the machine parts. Okay, so there should be some system which makes it cool. Okay, so coming to the third disadvantage of friction. So friction produces heat. That is, when we use a machine for a long time, you have seen that it gets heated up. For example, in the case of a mixer jar which we use in our kitchen, if you use it continuously for some time, and if you touch and see the jar, you can see that it gets heated, isn't it? It is hot, it appears hot. So what is the reason? The reason is that friction produces heat. And how is this heat produced? A lot of energy is wasted in overcoming the friction, and that is why the machine gets heated. Okay, and same is the case with other machines also. So overheating can cause damage to the different parts of the machine. So in order to avoid the damage, so we need to have a cooling system in the case of even automobiles, other machines, lot of other gadgets, etc. So similar is the case when we have a cooling system in the cars. Cars have a cooling system in order to keep the engine cool. So when we use or when we are in continuous use with something, it gets heated up. So in order to avoid the damage of the parts, we need to have a cooling system, and that is another disadvantage of friction. What is it? Friction produces heat. And how is the heat produced? Heat is produced because a lot of energy is wasted in overcoming the frictional force. Okay, now coming to the last disadvantage of friction. You have seen forest fires in movies, isn't it? And you have read about forest fires in newspapers. How does this forest fire occur? It occurs because the branches of the trees in forest, they rub against each other. So when these branches of the trees rub against each other, it produces fire. You know that extra friction, the friction force produces heat. So when the branches rub against each other, first heat is produced and then fire also is produced. So the fire spreads, and likewise forest fires occur. So that is another disadvantage of friction. So let us see the disadvantages once again. First of all, first disadvantage is that lot of energy is wasted in overcoming friction. And the second one is friction causes wear and tear of the different parts that rub against each other. We mentioned about the case of the soles of shoes, different machine parts, etc., tires of vehicles, okay, etc. Now the third disadvantage is that friction produces heat, and a lot of energy is wasted in overcoming the frictional force, and that is why friction produces heat. When we use machines, these machines get heated soon due to this energy which is wasted for overcoming friction. And the last disadvantage is that forest fires are caused because of the rubbing of the branches of trees against each other. Forest fires are caused when the branches of trees rub against each other. So today we had a discussion on the advantages as well as disadvantages of friction. So let us see the advantages point by point once again. We are able to walk and run on the ground with the help of the frictional force. If there is no frictional force, what will happen? We will slip and fall. Now, the nails and screws get fixed onto the walls due to the frictional force between the tip of the nail or screw and the wall. The third advantage is that we are able to light a matchstick with a matchbox with the help of the frictional force. The next advantage is that cars and buses are able to run on roads because of the frictional force between the tires and the road. Then without friction, writing on a paper as well as on a board is not possible. Otherwise, if there is no friction between the tip of the pen or the chalk and between the paper surface or the blackboard surface, what happens? If there is no frictional force, the pen would slip. Then friction helps to stop a moving vehicle. That is, it is because of the frictional force between the brake shoes and the wheels that bicycles and automobiles stop when brakes are applied. So today we had a discussion on the advantages as well as disadvantages of friction. So as a homework, I told you to read and understand page 149 and 150. And what is the topic? Friction, a necessary evil. And you prepare a note on the advantages and disadvantages of friction and write it down in your notebook. So what is your homework? You have to read the textual part and write a note on the advantages of friction as well as the disadvantages of friction in your notebook, okay, in your physics notebook. So do that, and also read in advance the next topic of this lesson, that is increasing and decreasing friction, which we are going to discuss in our next class. Okay, so that topic we will discuss in the next class, and by the next class we will wind up this lesson. So do what I said and be ready for the next class. So that's all for today's class. Do revise everything and make it thorough. So thank you and bye bye.